In 2016, Human Rights Watch published a report about the discrimination faced by the LGBTIQ community in Sri Lanka. The report recommends the urgent decriminalization of homosexuality, calls for sensitivity and anti-discrimination training for law enforcement and healthcare workers, and urges the government to inform citizens that all Sri Lankans are entitled to respect, protection, and human rights, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. The challenges described in the report have been at the center of LGBTIQ activism in Sri Lanka for the past 26 years. Despite being relatively young, Sri Lanka's LGBTIQ movement was one of the earliest in the South Asian region. It began with Companions on a Journey, Sri Lanka's first gay rights group. Founded in 1995 by activist Sherman De Rose, the organization set out to destigmatize homosexuality, repeal laws criminalizing same-sex relations, and promote HIV awareness and prevention, despite facing scrutiny and attacks from the government as well as the media. A women's desk was also established within the organization to support vulnerable queer women facing homelessness, unemployment, or violence. This eventually became the Women's Support Group, whose founding members included Sunila Abesekara and Rosanna Flema Caldera. In 1999, the Women's Support Group registered as a separate organization, providing aid and carrying out grassroots community work to advocate for lesbian and bisexual women and trans persons.
One of the first things that we did was help two lesbian women who were facing issues with family and stuff, were thrown out of their houses. We found shelter for them, we found jobs for them. And so on.
The organization went on to win the prestigious Felipa de Sousa Award, honoring international human rights initiatives twice.
The greatest achievement was the fact that we actually started a women's group, and that's really hard in this very patriarchal world that we live in.
In 2004, Flema Caldera founded Equal Ground, a non-profit organization working towards equal rights for LGBTIQ Sri Lankans, traveling all over the island to sensitize and educate communities.
We were going through a war. When we first started in 2004, the first thing that we encountered was the tsunami. And then we were still within a war situation. So it was very hard, to get things done, in spite of which we traveled to the north and the east.
Equal Ground has routinely faced intimidation and threats from religious groups, as well as investigations and surveillance by law enforcement authorities. Despite this, the organization has strengthened and branched out in its advocacy work, holding annual Pride celebrations in Colombo and conducting diversity and inclusion workshops for local companies.
We are very much about sensitizing and educating people about what we are and who we are. We are about sensitizing and educating our own LGBTIQ plus community to understand who they are and to embrace who they are.
Despite the success of collective LGBTIQ organizations, the unique needs of trans people within the larger movement prompted the formation of trans-specific advocacy groups. One of these was the Venice Transgender Network, the first organization catering to the needs of transgender, intersex, and gender non-conforming persons in Sri Lanka, which was founded in 2015 by activist Thenu Ranketh.
We might have one large goal, but the paths and ways that we do our work are different. And the strategies that we use might be totally different to other organizations.
The National Transgender Network was founded in 2018 and helps trans people with health advice, vocational training, educational development, and legal and surgical gender-affirming processes.
We have found, there were some gaps, there were some needs to have a specific network which is going to focus on trans empowerment. And the main vision that we have in National Transgender Network is to support trans community to have a better life. That's the main vision that we have.
Multiple other trans rights organizations were set up from 2018 onwards, most notably in Jaffna and Gampaha, in addition to Colombo. Trans activism has made significant progress in recent years, resulting in, for instance, the issuing of gender recognition certificates by the Ministry of Health, starting in 2016. The certificate allows trans people to amend their personal documents in accordance with their gender identity. A number of local hospitals have also successfully completed gender-affirming surgeries in both Colombo and Jaffna. The period between 2015 and 2019 witnessed a particular focus on shifting the movement and the key resources and support systems it offered LGBTIQ communities beyond Colombo and into the north and east.
You see a lot of LGBT organizations, and the way they approach the LGBT issue isn't actually addressing the intersectional issues of the community.
The Community Welfare and Development Fund, Chhatra LGBTIQ Network, along with a few other activists, helped establish LGBTIQ organizations in these regions. Such organizations include Jaffna Sangam in the north and Unitcham in the east. These groups cater to specific experiences of the Tamil-speaking LGBTIQ community who face layers of discrimination as both queer people and ethnic minorities. LGBTIQ agendas also developed a solid presence in mainstream politics during the 2019 presidential election. A collective left-leaning queer political entity, the Progressive Queer Collective, began working with the Janatha Vimukthi Peramuna before joining the National People's Power Coalition.
This was the first time that a party that representing parliament came out with LGBTIQ policy. We managed to get LGBT policy included in the manifesto of NPP's presidential candidate, Mr. Kumar Disanayake, in 2019. Then it became part of the official manifesto. Even in the general election, the LGBT policy was refined and expanded with some of the key demands that we have been fighting for a long time, yes.
Since 2020, the impact of COVID-19 has amplified the needs of queer communities, and a number of LGBTIQ groups have shifted their advocacy work to cater to more urgent requirements, such as food and shelter.
Put together a joint fund. We pool our resources together, and we channel it, and we distribute those resources to the most needy, precarious LGBTIQ individuals. Simply to save their dignity. That's about pride for me, at least in the pandemic situation, yes.
While the pandemic has interrupted the momentum of the movement, its dedicated progress through the civil war and resulting volatile social and political landscape sets a promising precedent.
Of course, we haven't managed to decriminalize homosexuality and other rights. But I think the recent trends in the LGBTIQ movement and emergence of queer left, right, and decentralization process give some promising hope and do not put us in an entirely pessimistic position. There is some optimism and there is some opening, but we'll see.